to the March meeting, February meeting of the Community Advisory Council. We have a couple of items on our agenda um, that I think are going to prompt some really good discussion about some upcoming MPO work. But first, for a couple of housekeeping items, I will pass it off to Gia.
Thank you, Sean, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gia Hong, and I'm the Public Engagement Coordinator at the Boston Region MPO. As Sean mentioned, I'll take us through a few notices. Next slide, please. First, I'll read our notice of non-discrimination. You are invited to participate in our transportation planning process, regardless of your race, color, national origin, including limited English proficiency, religion, creed, gender, ancestry, ethnicity, disability, age, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, veteran status, or background. You can read the full notice of your rights and protections at www.boston.npo.org/NPO_non_discrimination. Next slide, please. This meeting is accessible to people with disabilities. Zoom products are compliant with exceptions with the following standards: Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 Level AA standards and revised Section 508 standards. If you require any additional accommodations in order to participate fully in this meeting, or if you have any technical difficulties, please contact me, Gia Hong, MPO staff at jhung@ctps.org, or you can call at 857-702-3654 or via the chat box. Next slide, please. Next, you will take us through our guidelines. All participants will join the meeting with muted microphones. Please rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and affiliation. Participants may mute and unmute themselves. Always remain muted unless actively speaking. And to participate in the discussion, please select the raise hand function. You can find this by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button at the bottom, or using the reactions button in the toolbar. The chair will then call on participants. Please raise your hand via Zoom if you would like to use an AI note taker during this meeting. And if you're on the phone, you can use the *9 button to raise your hand. Next slide, please. With that, I will walk us through our introductions and roll call, starting with 495 Metro West Partnership.
Jason Palich, present on behalf of the 495 Metro West Partnership.
Hi, Jason. Thank you. Next, we have A Better City.
Hi, everyone. Scott Mullen from A Better City. Amir is on vacation today.
Thank you. Abundant Housing.
Hi, this is Jesse Canson Benanav. I'm here for Abundant Housing Mass.
Yeah. Bike to the Sea.
Hi, Jonah Chiarese here for Bike to the Sea.
Hello. City of Chelsea. City of Chelsea. Move on. Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation.
Hi, Jacinda Essenshade, present.
Conservation Law Foundation.
Hi, Paulina Muratori here on behalf of Conservation Law Foundation.
Thank you. Livable Streets Alliance.
Hi, this is Maha Aslam from Livable Streets Alliance.
Right, thank you. The Healthy Aging Collaborative.
Hey, good afternoon. James Fuccione from the Mass Healthy Aging Collaborative. Thank you.
Mass Bike.
Hi there, this is Galen Moak from Mass Bike.
Mystic River Watershed Association.
This is Carl Alexander here.
Thank you. Mystic Valley Elder Services.
Meg Van Lassiter, Mystic Valley.
Thank you. The PRC.
Hello, Angie Craddock here from the PRC.
Transportation for Massachusetts.
Hi, Reggie here for T4MA. Beat is also here.
Thank you. Town Green.
Hi, it's Maureen Aylward from Town Green.
Thank you. Town of Natick.
Morgan Griffiths here from the town of Natick.
Thank you. Transit Matters.
This is Will Palmer here for Transit Matters and for Caitlin Allen Conley.
Thank you. And Watertown TMA.
Sophia Gallimore, Watertown TMA.
Thank you. Right. Thanks. Next slide, please. Awesome. I'll pass it back to Sean for the chair's report.
Thanks, Gia. Now I will invite Carl from Mystic River Watershed Association to give the chair's report, or in this case, the vice chair's report.
Great. Hello. I thought Will was doing it today.
Okay, sure. Yeah,
Yep.
we can.
Will, what did we cross our wires here? Will, do you have anything prepared?
I do. Sean, if you give me a minute to pull up my notes, I apologize here.
No problem.
Sorry, and I'm seeing that you messaged me too, separately. Sorry about that.
This may be like a slightly long moment. I have a few too many tabs open. I don't remember if there's another piece of business we want to attend to in the meantime.
Sure. We can take this out of order and we can ask if there are any public comments. If there is, you can raise your hands.
Yeah.
Okay. Not seeing any, we can double back to the the previous agenda item here.
Great. And Will, I have it up. I can field it. If that's okay. I think
That's fine with me. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, Caitlin had drafted the notes. I think just wanted to express an appreciation to everyone for contributions at the last meeting. We just to give you a preview of today's meeting, we'll be hearing from MPO staff on two topics. First, about options for policy studies for staff to pursue this coming federal fiscal year, which begins in October. And second is an update to the MPO's public engagement plan. In conversation that Caitlin's had about the policy studies, we're really excited to have a thorough engagement and discussion so that we may, I think, synthesize and really clarify how we as a body can advocate for those studies around topics that hopefully are important to your work, and we'd like to be seen advance further. Will, did I miss anything from your end based on your recent conversations?
No, I think that covers it. Yeah, thank you.
All right, great. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Will and Carl. So now we'll move on to the approval of the January 12th, 2026 meeting minutes. First, does anybody have any questions, comments, or corrections to the minutes? Okay, seeing and hearing none, can I please get a motion and a second to approve the January 2026 minutes?
So moved.
I saw
And
Scott
seconded.
first. Okay.
I can second.
Yeah.
You-
Okay, so let's say Scott's the first and Jesse's the second for purposes of the minutes for this meeting. All right, great. Gia, can you please call the roll?
Sounds good. 495 Metro West Partnership.
Yes.
A Better City.
Yes.
Abundant Housing Mass.
Yes.
Bike to the Sea.
Yes.
City of Chelsea. Codman Square Neighborhood Development Corporation.
Yeah.
Conservation Law Foundation.
Yes.
Livable Streets Alliance.
Yes.
Mass Healthy Aging Collaborative.
Yes.
Mass Bike.
Yes.
Mystic River Watershed Association.
Yes.
Mystic Valley Elder Services.
Yes.
The PRC.
Yes.
Transportation for Massachusetts.
Yes.
Town Green,
Yes.
Town of Natick,
Yes.
Transit Matters,
Transit Matters, yes.
Watertown TMA.
Yes.
Thank you. I'll pass back to you, Sean.
Thanks, Gia. Excuse me. Before we move on to our next topic, I want to note that because we have such a full agenda this time, we're not doing the member share out, but we hope to be able to bring that back at the March meeting. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague Olivia for a discussion of the options for discrete studies for MPO staff to pursue in the next federal fiscal year.
Hi, everyone. My name is Olivia Scotia. I am the program manager for our Unified Planning Work Program, which we also refer to as our annual work plan. And we're in the process of developing our next work plan for the next year. So that's why I'm here to talk to you all today a little bit more about discrete studies. Next slide, please. So a small but important part of our yearly work plan budget is allocated to discrete studies, which essentially are standalone studies that are meant to be completed in 1 year and have some type of measurable outcome. And they also serve to complement the work that we do within our other ongoing programs, essentially allowing us to explore a topical transportation issue or topic that we aren't already addressing or exploring through our other programs. And over the past 3 years, our funding for discrete studies has been pretty consistent, around $150,000. And depending on the scope of the study, this could translate into 1 to 2 studies. In some cases where we have a more narrow scope, we have funded 3 studies in 1 year. But that would typically require us to conduct like additional follow-up studies in future years to really produce the overall intended deliverable that we kind of set out to produce. So that's just something to keep in mind with pricing of the studies. Next slide, please. So what we'll be doing today is discussing 5 discrete studies that we could potentially incorporate into our next work plan. Us as MPO staff have worked together across the agency over the past few months to develop this list of 5 proposals. And we evaluated these studies based on our capacity as staff to be able to complete these studies in the 2027 federal fiscal year. And we also evaluated how well they align with our agency objectives and how well they help us to address our long-range transportation goals for the region. And then just to give you a little bit of line of sight into the future, on February 26th, at the end of this month, the UPWP committee will be voting on which studies will be incorporated into our next work plan. And as you know, the Advisory Council holds a seat on the UPWP committee and will be sharing this group's perspectives on each study at that meeting. And the Advisory Council representative will also be participating in the vote as well. So that's why we're meeting today, is to essentially have a discussion to capture the Advisory Council's thoughts on these 5 studies. I will take a moment to pause before we jump into our study discussions in case anyone has questions about the process that I just explained. And if not, we can move on to the next slide, please.
Olivia, I'm sorry, just for clarity. So the 5 are going up for, I guess, determination which ones will be part of 2027 fiscal year, or are all 5 going to be part of it?
Good question. So we don't have enough funds to incorporate all 5 into our next work plan. So we're discussing, the discussion of these studies today will help us determine which ones we want to essentially prioritize and incorporate into our next work plan, which may be 1 to 2 of these 5 studies.
Okay. Okay.
Paulina?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to discussing these more today. If this is like a better question for another time, just let me know. But I guess I'm kind of wondering in the past, sort of in the history of proposing discrete studies, is there an example of 1 or 2 that eventually did kind of come out of study phase and into like project phase? I'm just trying to understand like the path of some of these over time and if there has been an example of them moving from sort of study idea to reality.
Yes. I can provide an example, and I think I might lean on some of my other staff to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a few years ago we had a discrete study about freight, just general like freight or the freight transportation network, and that led to the freight transportation program that we have now. So I think it essentially led to a whole program. Actually, I think I might be mixing my programs. It might be our multimodal mobility infrastructure design program. Sorry about that. I'm mixing them up. But essentially, they can lead into more permanent, I guess, program areas and things that we study. I wouldn't say that's like super common, but that is an example of what could happen.
Yeah, I can provide a couple other examples. Sorry, I couldn't find the raise hand button, so I just talked. I can provide a couple of other examples. These are mostly like policy studies, not so much like studies that lead at least directly to projects that would end up on our list of transportation projects that we provide capital funding for. But some examples of these studies yielding real world results in recent years that I'm aware of. The study on access on public transit access to the Blue Hills reservation after a couple of years of collaboration with the MBTA led to seasonal pilot service providing bus access from Mattapan Square to Houghton's Pond. And it's expected that was last year, and expected that pilot service is going to seasonal service is going to be repeated again this spring, summer, and fall. So that's one area. There are areas where these studies have been the foundation of further work within MPO programs, like the freight study that Olivia mentioned, that led to sort of like more realization of organizing work in the freight area around a program and incorporating that work into the larger multimodal work. And there have been studies exploring different software and platforms that have led to changes in our project scoring, our TIP project scoring, that have led to advancements there in terms of more equitable analysis or more analysis about equity of access to different key locations. Off the top of my head, over the last few years, those are some of the examples. Depending on where the studies sort of enter in like the stream of momentum of that work, it can be, within a year or two that we see sort of advancement of this work in the MPO's practice. But then if it's a larger regional or statewide policy issue, that's obviously like a larger effort between multiple different levels of stakeholders that requires some more coordination and time to advance. Looks like Maha from Livable Streets has her hands up, Olivia.
Yeah. Hi. I guess my second question would be, so in terms of like the studies, like then is it when people like when the committee like votes and stuff, is there like a basic like way they're measuring like if this, for instance, like something like the Access to Blue Hills report that seemed like something that's um you can you once the research is done, like some of the outcomes might actually be used like in the near future. So is there like any considerations on like which studies get like more voted because there's more likelihood of them like getting like becoming a part of future work with the MPO, or is it like mostly just like the impact and like, depending on, or is there like, just wondering like if there's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question as well. I think that's something that the committee does discuss in our just discussions of these studies. We actually had essentially what I'm doing today. We did with the PWP committee a few weeks ago, just to simply get our thoughts out on these studies, and things like that do come up. So it is kind of I would say something that the committee discusses and determines like what they think would be the most useful for us to invest our work in. I guess I don't. Does that answer your question? I'm sorry if that wasn't like super clear.
No, I see your point. I think like I was just trying to think like even while we're selecting the studies, should we think about what is most likely to get voted on, or should we just go with what we think is like, useful for us and our work and is relevant regardless of these things, if whether eventually they get voted on or not?
Yeah, I would say what would be most helpful is kind of what you mentioned, just like what perspectives you would like the MPO to engage in, or like what topics would you like us to study that would be most helpful for you or the kind of your constituents or people that are involved in your organizations. I would take that approach to this discussion. Great questions, everyone. Anything else before we jump in? Okay. If not, I will just briefly mention we're trying to have about a 10-minute discussion per study just so we can get through everything, which we'll try to keep track of as staff and move along the conversation when we can. And I'll start by just briefly introducing the study and then feel free to jump in with any thoughts. So the first one we're going to discuss today is titled Roadway Pricing Technical Evaluation Phase 2. This one is priced at $75K to $150K. So something to keep in mind and consider is that this study could potentially take the full amount of funding that we have for discrete studies next year if we want the scope to be at the full maximum amount. So something to think about there. And this study, essentially, as it says in the name, it builds off of the first phase of a roadway pricing evaluation that we did. We actually completed that recently, and a few months ago, we presented the findings to the board. And so what this part of or phase of the study will do is essentially evaluate different roadway pricing strategies. For example, we would be testing different cordon boundaries, testing different price levels to ultimately understand what the trade-offs would be between these different strategies. And the analysis will also compare different outcomes related to equity and revenue generation. And the purpose ultimately of this study is to help inform future policy discussions around roadway pricing for our region. So with that, if anyone has any thoughts or questions, please feel free to just jump in. I saw Will's hand first.
So I'd like to say I think the roadway pricing study is very important and very worth being sufficiently funded even at the higher level. We've seen the impact that roadway pricing can have in our peer regions around the world. And the MPO's initial work last year provided really valuable data. I mean, the white paper is really great. Provided valuable data to begin informed conversations across the region about this topic. And likewise highlights, as you mentioned, areas that will provide even more important detail and nuance through further study. So I think it's a very important study and well worth our consideration.
Thank you. I have Jason next.
Thank you. Jason Palich speaking now for the 495 Metro West Partnership. Certainly, this is a topic that merits reflection and study. My organization does not have a position on congestion pricing other than we do support studying it. I would like to request that if this project moves forward, that the analysis gives special consideration to regional equity. My organization serves 36 cities and towns in the Boston area, none of which are served by MBTA bus or subway. So we do have some choice limited commuters who, if their employment opportunity is in Boston and more affordable housing is points west, may be burdened by a choice that is intended both to raise revenues, but also potentially to impact discretionary or by choice behavior. So if this study were to move forward, we would certainly appreciate if it could focus on regional equity, consider commuters who may not live in an area served by MBTA bus or subway, where alternatives to vehicle commuting may mean that they are more exposed to a choice made. But in tandem with that, consider where revenues generated from such an approach might be used for reinvestment if in the regions or riders who might not have ready access to alternatives. So again, just would like, if this project does move forward, would request that special consideration be given to regional equity in the analysis, which will of course be a very important part of any political conversation as to whether or not such an approach were to move forward. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. And definitely we're noting what you mentioned, and just wanted to reiterate that equity will be certainly part of this analysis as we have it planned right now. So thank you. Maha?
Yeah, just wanted to plus one a lot of stuff that Jason said. Some of us advocates, we went to New York like a few weeks ago with T4Mass for congestion pricing, and I think the study is definitely very, very needed and much needed for our region. And I think, like to Jason's point, like what would be important in the equity part is all the funds raised from congestion pricing, like where are we spending that money, and like how we make sure like equity is centered around those conversations, because we learned from at least our time in New York that some of the money was allocated for like ADA like MTA improvements and some stuff in the I think it was some mitigation in Bronx, I forget exactly, but again, like identifying where like the cost of this could like subset some of those like inequities, or just improve our regional transit options. So just wanted to plus one some of that.
Great. Thank you for those comments. Scott, would you like to go ahead?
I would, Olivia. Thank you. I just wonder if you could lay out for, not just for me, but anybody else who hasn't become fully familiar with the report that was released, the phase one, I guess we'd call it, report that was released in December. How is this different, and how does it build upon and not duplicate the great work that's already been done?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the phase one, which I'm also happy to link eventually in our chat, essentially, it's my understanding we evaluated the tools and data that we would have access to essentially assess different roadway pricing scenarios. And this would help us, or this phase of the study would essentially allow us to conduct the analysis. But Rose, let me have you explain it better than I can.
Sure. Happy to jump in here. So there's a few different ways that we can go, and it sort of depends upon the funding level. I think one of the things that we wanted to do and we started to do to touch on that regional equity question, we used a tool called Conveil to measure accessibility to understand who can get to the cordon that we developed within a 30-minute transit ride. I think there's ways we'd like to expand that and overlap that with demographics a little bit more to understand like where we're creating the choice on people who really don't have that economic choice. So there's some details around, the initial sketch model we did that we'd like to dig into a little bit further. I think we do want to look just a little bit at, changing the geography and the prices to understand how that changes behavior to really start to make the trade-offs of this program a little bit clearer, what roadway pricing would look like here. And another piece, we're working on some of this a little bit independently, but understanding what the transit network could accommodate. We can model a bunch of mode shift, but if the transit system can't accommodate it, it doesn't really help. So we would be looking in tandem at the transit network where there is capacity, where it might wind up being capacity constrained, and what investments it would take to support, the type of mode shifts that we would want to see with this type of a road pricing program. So there's a lot of different ways we can continue to work on this study, and appreciate the suggestions you all have to make sure that we're making it useful for the region.
Okay, I have Carl next.
Great. Hi. This is a brief comment, but I'm curious about how, and maybe the folks who did travel down to New York City, maybe observe this a little bit, but what happens and how we might be able to evaluate what happens immediately outside of the cordon zone. Additional shifts in parking demand, transit demand for those particular areas. Do have those transit stations immediately outside of the cordon zone see a spike in ridership? So I'm just wondering how, for folks looking to avoid the cordon zone, how they might impact regional transportation. And especially considering that too, because if the immediate boundary is an environmental justice neighborhood, then you're actually placing additional burden on those communities versus the downtown core. So wanted to kind of float that question. Thank you.
I can speak to that from the technical side. Our regional travel demand model is, has that regional lens and is really iterative. So there's feedback loops within it. And so we would understand, not only what happens within that cordon zone, but outside. And I know some of the research coming out of New York is showing that there's really significant air quality benefits, broadly extending beyond Manhattan. So that's the sort of thing we could model with our travel demand model. Where we do have some challenges modeling is that parking demand. I think, we're just really struggling with having data on even what parking is available and how much people want to use it, and that's not unique to our area. And that's also not something there's some implicit ways you can get at parking demand in our travel demand model, but we wouldn't be able to think about how people would respond, say, by parking, a block outside of the cordon zone and then trying to travel in. So that's an area we could start to look at a little bit more. But outside of parking, I think, we are looking at it holistically and how it will change behavior, not only in the cordon zone, but across the region.
Great, thank you.
Reggie, please go ahead.
Hi, first of all, I was just reading your December 2025 roadway pricing paper, and I just want to congratulate you. It's great work. It really just provides sort of this bird's eye view of what could happen if we had implemented some permutation of roadway pricing here in Boston. So yeah, congratulations on the great work, and I'm looking forward to this study being made, this roadway pricing phase 2. And I know that you have already spoken to on what the trade-offs that you might be looking at for this second study. I also want to address Carl's question because it was our group that went to New York City on a study tour. So one of the things that they saw was commuter speed in bridges and tunnels actually improved by 23.8%. So folks coming in from New Jersey, Brooklyn, and Queens saw immediate, ease in traffic. So going into the central business district or the congestion relief zone was much, much easier for them. I think this was one of the surprises from the success of the New York congestion pricing. So there's that. I just wanted to make sure that I really like the point of looking at whether there are public transit improvements that ought to be looked at as we are thinking about or possibly thinking about implementing some sort of roadway pricing in Boston. And so that to me is a very interesting piece. The other piece I will say is that this study or studying this is really, really important, especially since, I think you came out with a report in 2024 of community value. So obviously I'm reading all your reports. This is one of the ways that really kind of like have a very promising be a really promising revenue source. Especially as we're looking for more funding for transportation, not just of the greater Boston area, but of the entire state. So, just to say that, we're fully supportive of this being the study that we end up doing. I looked at the other proposals that Caitlin had sent through us, and this really for us bubbles up into the top, just because of its return, of its promise of return, but also because of the many co-benefits that we're seeing in New York City. So yeah, thank you for the great work and hoping for this study to go through.
Thanks for those thoughts, Reggie. I see Paulina's hand.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to echo what others have said in terms of this feeling that this is a really important study to move forward. So +1 to all that. My question is, it sounds like within the range of the cost estimate, there are different, the details would kind of shift depending on ultimately how much how much funding is available for it. I was wondering if, let's say it is selected, in terms of all the inputs and what to look at, are there other opportunities for this group to provide input, or sort of what that would look like moving forward if it was selected?
I can jump in there a little bit. I think it's something that would come up during the scoping of the study. I mean, in the phase 1, what we did was we talked to the CMP committee, which is another subcommittee of our MPO board, to get some feedback from them on which metrics they thought would be the most important for us to evaluate in the study. And so I do think there'll be a broader discussion of what we should focus on in this. Which exact forum it'll be, I can't say right now, but that's part of the goal of doing this work, is to try to start having the conversation in more places and start to really nail down what are the goals and priorities of this region to help make this, the most impactful it can be. So I know that's not a full answer to your question, but, we are taking notes at all of these discussions, and that will definitely feed into how we scope the work.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, Paulina. Does anyone have any other comments that they'd like to say regarding this study? If not, it seems like now is a good time to move on to our next study. So this one is titled Impact of Parking Supply on Property Values. This one is priced between $40,000 to $50,000. And this study essentially will take a data-driven approach to investigate how parking supply impacts the sale price for different properties. And the study hopes to establish separate conclusions for commercial versus residential properties, if possible. And essentially, the goal of this one is to produce data that will help inform parking policy decisions, because something that we often hear from developers is that they report that banks or lenders are wary of investing in projects with limited parking. Yeah, so if anyone wants to start, please raise your hand. Awesome. I see Jesse's hand first.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to provide our strong support for this one. We at Abundant Housing do a lot of work on parking reform, both in the state level and in cities. And we've seen in our region, Cambridge, Somerville, Salem, and Boston, for at least affordable housing, have eliminated parking minimums, which drive up the cost of housing, because it can be quite expensive to build parking, particularly structured parking in the urban core. But we also do have research from MAPC a few years ago stating that we're overbuilding parking. We have a lot more paved area in new developments than is actually being utilized, which has challenges in terms of just the amount of paved surface and storms increase, et cetera. But ultimately, we've heard a lot in the conversations around the region as communities are thinking about parking reform, like what is the actual impact going to be? We know that the impact in terms of the savings for building housing and producing more reasonably priced housing is real. If you don't have to build parking, it makes it less costly to build housing, or if you don't have to build as much parking, at least it makes it less costly for those future renters and buyers. But absolutely, we have seen in communities, not just in our region or in Massachusetts, but around the country, that developers are not necessarily always building less parking, even if the local parking regulations allow them to, because their lenders tend to be very shy about bucking what they know has worked and has made sure that they get the returns that they need to actually lend to these projects. So there's conversations going on in Beacon Hill and in Boston City Hall right now around either statewide or citywide parking minimum elimination or reform. And I think having data like this will help advance those, because we can sort of address some of the challenges that policymakers confront of, well, why would we change this policy if the builders can't actually do what the goal of the policy is? So this seems like a fairly low cost study among the others. And I think it would be really beneficial, not just for our region, but actually I think it could be a tool that would be useful across the country, as many other cities and states have actually investigated this and confronted similar challenges. So just wanted to lend support for this one in particular.
Thanks, Jesse. Thanks for those thoughts. And I will just mention, I know you shared some work that MAPC has done around this, and us being kind of partner agencies, we're definitely looking to collaborate with them where we can and make sure that our work is building off of each other. So they've already, laid some great work in this area. Jason, please go ahead.
Thank you, Jason Palich with the 495 MentorWest Partnership. I'm in agreement with much of what Jesse said. I won't belabor the point. Our organization has identified the lack of adequate housing supply and the lack of a diverse housing stock in our region as a significant threat to quality of life. We know that obviously the MPO is aware of that as well, and the Commonwealth has certainly focused on the need to create additional housing units. Obviously, discussions around parking restriction are ones that we know are taking place, sometimes heavily motivated by emotion and a desire potentially to obstruct development as opposed to fact. We understand this would be far from the only such study on the subject, but certainly the addition of further thoughtful evidence-based research to inform this topic we think would be of value. So we are supportive of this.
Thank you, Jason. Morgan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So just from a municipal perspective, I think as a planner, parking minimums, maximums can always be a little bit of a challenging conversation with folks, when the planning board or municipal staff are thinking about amending them. So I think having just more data on hand to sort of construct a narrative could be really helpful. So I think I'm generally supportive of this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for that perspective, Morgan. Any other comments about this study? If not, I think we can move on to our next one. This one is titled, yes, there it is on the screen. This one's titled Representing the Experience of Limited Mobility Individuals Phase 2. This one is priced at $30,000 to $50,000. And essentially, this is something that if this study were to be funded, we build upon the phase 1 part of representing the experience of limited mobility individuals, which was chosen to be a discrete study for this current year, FFY 2026. So this is actually work that we are currently doing now, and we will finish in the fall of this coming fall. So what this phase 2 of the study would do is essentially help us advance the recommendations that we find in phase 1 of the study. So we'd ultimately be able to develop better metrics and data sets to improve how the work we do at the MPO reflects the experience of limited mobility individuals. So it would help us to improve essentially our transportation planning analyses to represent how folks with limited mobility have access to our transportation system. So I will open it up to discussion now. Meg, please.
Hi, I just figured out how to raise my hand. I'm from Mystic Valley Elder Services, and we just want to speak out to support this as an organization that serves older adults and people with disabilities. It's definitely something that we would love to see more come out of, and that there's continued research on how this could impact. And so seeing that it would continue onto phase 2 would be really important and something that we definitely support.
Thanks, Meg.
And then Reggie asked in the chat whether the study will look into accessibility in autonomous vehicles.
I can jump in on that. I think the focus of this is really for people navigating sidewalks and how to navigate that. It's not as much for vehicle travel at this phase of the work.
Oh, and just so people are aware, Rose is the manager of our project analysis and applications team, and her team has a lot of data analysts on staff who apply the tools that the MPO develops. And it so happens that a lot of the studies in the proposal list this year would almost certainly heavily make use of the skills of the staff on Rose's team. So that's why, thankful Rose is here to answer some more specific technical questions about how this work would go.
Scott, I see your comment in the chat. So this is currently, phase 1 is work we're currently doing, but I can find, I believe we have the scope available online that we can share. So we don't quite have the results yet. Those will come in sometime in probably September or October.
I could
Carl.
just chime in and say that this is an example of a study that we had initially at this time last year proposed as a bigger study to both look at what potential data sets we could use to help us think about how people can access destinations when they do have limited mobility. And so because of the way we were funding studies, we reduced the budget a bit. And so this phase of the research is to do some stakeholder engagement, literature review, and sort of come up with an action for how the MPO can start to think about mobility limitations in our more quantitative analysis. And so this phase 2 would be to start to apply the lessons that we've learned in phase 1 and really come at it from that more technical perspective. So it's a good example of how these studies can start to build on each other when they work that way.
Carl, please go ahead.
Yeah, I just thinking about, right, the pedestrian scale is so dictated by local jurisdiction, that having some uniformity on research is certainly important, especially given that, yeah, like this is an issue, this is an equity issue, right? Where if you're serving the needs of a very vulnerable population, then it's serving the needs of everyone, and improving quality of life for everyone. So definitely want to give a strong support to this study. And given the time of year, right? Like, I don't know, it goes without saying, but I can only imagine being stuck inside my house for 2 months right now, because the snow isn't melting. So I hope that there's maybe a weather or a seasonality to such a study as well that looks at that's getting more into operations rather than capital, maybe, but definitely do want to kind of put a nod again to the importance of this topic and aligning with other, goals for, increasing active mobility throughout the region too. Thanks.
Thanks, Carl. Noted those thoughts there. Galen, please go ahead.
Cool, thanks. I'm gonna kind of double down on what Carl was saying, especially around the maintenance and the continuity of the networks that are around. I think that could be studied through this, and I also want to kind of suggest that if this goes forward, to also combine a bit of the future micromobility conversations that I'm sure the MPO is going to be taking part of. So to keep in mind that mobility devices and scooters and e-bikes and et cetera are kind of being merged now in terms of their usage. And so to maybe study how new policy regulations regarding micromobility may also be a part of this phase 2 study as well.
Thank you. If there are no other comments about this study, I think just to keep things moving along, we'll move on to our fourth out of 5 studies today. This one is called Transportation Network Company, or TNC, Trip Patterns and Mobility Impacts in the Boston Region. This one is priced at $40,000 to $50,000. And ultimately, what this study would do is provide insights into whether TNC trips like Ubers or Lyfts compete with or complement transit usage within our region. And we would be looking at different parts of our region. So we would investigate TNC trip patterns in places like closer to the inner core of the Boston area, and also areas a little further out where there is limited transit service. So it would be taking into consideration different levels of transit access and where we study these patterns. Sophia, please go ahead.
So I just want to say that for the city of Watertown, they utilized the funds from the TNC to support the shuttle service. So, it's a huge part of the contribution that the city makes towards the shuttle network itself. Now, we did have a mobility study that was sort of suggested other ways that we could try to reduce some of the trips, some of the TNC trips. But it was just a suggestion, and it was just, kind of thrown on the, like, a overall study that they were doing for Watertown. But I just wanted to say that, the funds that come from this is very critical to our local shuttle system that we run in Watertown.
Thank you for sharing that perspective, Sophia. We have that noted. Scott, please go ahead.
Thank you. I just wonder, because I know MAPC has done studied TNCs from multiple angles, right? Like fee assessments, rider surveys. They did the food delivery, which is a big part now. It's not just moving people, it's moving chicken sandwiches. And I just wonder, how would this, and I really am interested to know what this study, what the scope might be, and how we can sort of expand our visibility of the impacts, which I believe are outsized but not fully understood. So just wondering, how does it not duplicate? I think that was my first question. How does it not duplicate the work that's already been done, but really build upon it?
Yeah, that's another great point to bring up, because this is another kind of TNC research is another area where, as you noted, MAPC is doing some research into. So, Rose, yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to chime in that so a couple of years ago, the state started requiring that TNCs share their full trip data, like trip traces. And so this is an opportunity to start to explore, not just anecdotally or origin destination, but where are these trips actually going? And so, we've been partnering with MAPC and MassDOT and OPMI, and every agency, who's interested in transportation planning is starting to pull this data, understanding how to wrangle it. So this is our first foray into trying to understand that a little bit. And so it really would be focused on transit, much like the Blue Bike study that we did that was sort of looking at the competitive versus complementary uses of those services with transit. This would be doing something very similar, looking at the trip patterns that start or end near a transit stop, and starting to think about how TNCs are supporting or pulling away from transit.
Wonderful. I appreciate that. If that data set is public, if it's posted somewhere on MassDOT's data portal or somewhere else, if you could share that link, that'd be amazing.
Yeah, it's not public. I believe there's been an extensive process of getting access to the data, and it is massive and challenging. I think there's a data use agreement. I haven't been on the forefront of those conversations, but it's available, but not easily available.
Understood. Thank you.
So if there are no other comments about this one, I think we can move on to our last study. This one is opportunities for the Boston Region MPO to support transit-oriented development. This one is also priced between $40,000 to $50,000. And with the study, we would conduct a literature review, and we'd also be conducting interviews with peer MPOs or other similar agencies, essentially to determine the best ways for the MPO to advance the objectives of the MBTA Communities Act through just kind of our overall work in planning, programming, and policy. So that is kind of the goal of this study. I saw Jesse's hand first.
Yeah, thanks. Definitely want to express strong support for this one. I think as maybe the primarily housing focused organization in this group, we do a lot of work on the MBTA Communities Act. I have done put a lot of resources into it over the last few years. And I think that, we have an extreme shortage of homes in Massachusetts. We need to build a lot more homes. I think all of us on the call probably understand the benefit of it being primarily transit oriented and giving people access to transit rather than sort of perpetuating the sprawling development styles that we've had for some generations. I think MBTA Communities Act is the biggest sort of transit-oriented zoning reform that the state has ever done and is likely to do again for at least the foreseeable future. It has been a lot of work. We've played a small role in it. Many organizations and state agencies have played a role, and municipal planners and others in implementing it. We definitely really want to make sure it works. The law itself was drafted so that if towns are not in compliance with it, they lose some funding. And then the first actually Baker administration, then Healy administration expanded the amount of state grants, discretionary grant programs in a variety of areas that municipalities are ineligible for if they don't comply. One of the challenges with this law over the last few years are kind of twofold. One is there's not actually any benefit for complying other than you are meeting the letter of the law. We don't want this law to be an incentive program. It is a mandate that towns should do because we have a housing crisis and we need them to address it. But at the same time, except for remaining eligible for certain grant programs, there's not necessarily an explicit benefit. So we've seen a lot other than playing your part in meeting our regional and state housing needs. We have seen a lot of communities adopt sort of paper compliance, which is they are meeting the letter of the law in the zoning districts that they adopt, but they're not actually written in a way that actual transit-oriented development or any development will result from them. It's sort of a cynical ploy to avoid being maybe sued by the Attorney General. I think that research like this could be useful to help create some mechanisms or programming for there to be real benefits for communities who are in compliance with the MBTA Communities Act, which is 165 of 177, although probably the vast majority of them are unlikely to see any real transit-oriented development come because of the way they've created their districts. So given that the MBTA Communities Act is the largest transit-oriented state zoning reform that we'll see in any foreseeable future, and that like the state, the legislature can't actually write consequences in it in terms of like benefits or consequences from like the MPO. The state can't say you're ineligible for MPO, et cetera, et cetera. I think having some study like this to understand how the MPO can play a role in helping support those communities that are doing the right thing, which is the vast majority of them, I think would be really, really beneficial and would allow us to actually move the needle on other areas of state zoning reform, like parking reform, as we were talking about earlier, which the legislature has a hard time addressing because they felt overwhelmed by some of the perceived pushback or non-compliance or paper compliance with the MBTA Communities Act. So I hope that all makes sense. I'll stop there. But yeah, strongly support this one.
Thanks, Jesse.
Just to jump in before we hear from Emily and Morgan, because I definitely do want to get the municipal perspective on this. Emily and Morgan, I would just ask that you keep your remarks to under a minute each, just because we do have to move on to the next agenda item, and I want to make sure we leave enough time for that. So thank you. No, Jesse, thank you. That was like I don't want to shortchange this one just because it's at the end of the list.
Morgan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. So as an MBTA community, I think something that we've heard a lot as town staff is like, yeah, increased density, et cetera, is all very well, but like, how is the transportation network in the area going to be able to handle this increase, in people? Or I think we've heard a lot that like the state is focusing more on housing than on transportation itself. And so I think that's bred a lot of sort of skepticism, about folks will be realistically using anything but cars to get around. And so there's like this fear, I think, that traffic will kind of just skyrocket. So as town staff, we're trying to ameliorate this to a degree by making our MBTA communities district more walkable and bikeable. But I think it would be great to see this side of TOD addressed a little bit more, especially if possible, like how it can be built into MPO processes, like the tip or technical assistance or some kind of like specificity there. So yeah, I think we would definitely be supportive of something like that.
Thanks, Morgan. Those are great suggestions. Emily, please go ahead.
Yeah, the city of Chelsea is also really strongly supportive of this one. We are seeing a lot of the similar things to what Morgan is seeing about like Chelsea's already very dense, very congested. One thing we specifically wanted to flag, and I'll probably put some more things in the chat because we had some really interesting conversation about this internally, is just Chelsea is already we are a rapid bus centric community. The rapid bus networks in Chelsea carry at least 14,000 people a day, which is as much as some of the big like subway transportation hubs. And we are curious at what can be done to sort of reward and build on bus service around transit-oriented developments that actually happen, because we see in Chelsea that that is a really effective way to move people, but the bus service isn't always where it needs to be to actually make that effective. So is there a way that the MBO can work with the MBTA to say, as part of a transportation demand management plan for a TOD, say if you meet this threshold, the MBTA will prioritize increasing service frequency on the bus that serves this TOD?
Thank you for that perspective, Emily. Yeah, we've noted that as well. Thank you. I think I saw Will's hand, but I don't know, Will, if you wanted to say anything or.
Only just that I put something in the chat, but Sean responded there.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
All right.
So I think,
I was going to say thank you, Olivia. We're going to provide additional ways for advisory council members to provide feedback on these study proposals via email after this meeting and the follow-up email that we send after each meeting. So there will be another opportunity for you to think more about this and provide additional feedback. But Olivia is going to collect all of the feedback, as are the chair and vice chair of the advisory council, to bring that information and the preferences of the group forward to future UPWP committee meetings. All right, thank you. Okay, so to move on to our final agenda item, I am going to be discussing a planned update to the MPO's public engagement plan. Next slide, please. So I want to start by grounding us in what the MPO's public engagement plan is and why it exists. We've mentioned the plan before, but it was very briefly, and it was several months ago. So I forgive you if this feels like the first time you're hearing about it, because it's certainly the first time you're hearing about it in this much detail. But the public engagement plan is a federally required document that describes the public engagement strategies and practices used throughout the MPO's work. It's not an engagement plan for a single project, but an umbrella document that explains how the MPO approaches decision-making or approaches engagement across all of our planning, programming, and decision-making. It's also a transparency document, and it's meant to clearly explain how different stakeholders, and there's a long list of stakeholders in the federal regulations that include public agencies, transit riders, people who walk and bike, people with disabilities, municipalities, how all the types of stakeholders can engage with the MPO and how their input is considered. Before I move on, does anyone have any questions about the role of the public engagement plan itself? I know I haven't given you a lot of information to react to, but I hope I provided like an overview of like what the plan is in terms of it being like an umbrella document. Yeah, Scott?
I just wonder, is this a new requirement, or is this something that the MPOs had to work under? Wow.
Yeah, good question. All MPOs are required to have, I think they call them public participation plans. We call ours a public engagement plan, in order to remain certified to receive federal funding through USDOT. So it's not a new requirement. They're not required to be updated on a specific basis. Ours, where we would just like to update to bring into alignment with some of the practices that have evolved since the last update we did, which was in 2021. So every MPO is required to have one, and the engagement practices of an MPO are required to be drawn from that plan. But there is allowance for customization of the strategies and practices used based on the size of the region, the demographics of the region, et cetera. Different MPOs can have different responsibilities in different regions and in different states. So that's why, rather than sort of approving individual elements of engagement in our various projects, the USDOT approves a plan that then we hold ourselves to. Okay, next slide, please. So as I said, the last full update to the public engagement plan was in 2021. And since then, our engagement practice has evolved in some important but mostly incremental ways. The 2026 update is about bringing the plan into alignment with those changes and improvements in our practices. Some concrete examples are the formation of the Community Advisory Council, the use of engagement data dashboards and regular engagement updates to the MPO board, and the normalization of virtual and hybrid engagement. On that last item, to use it as an example, when the plan was last updated, it was in the summer of 2021, and no one was sure how long the COVID-19 pandemic was going to last, and there was still an assumption that we'd be returning to exclusively in-person engagement events and meetings. So in the current plan, it mentions remote and virtual engagement, but sort of as anomalous and temporary. And so in reality, virtual engagement and settings like this have become embedded into our practice because it's allowed us to reach stakeholders in a way that we couldn't before, leading to more equitable and comprehensive engagement. So this is one example of a practice that we'll be codifying in the updated plan to illustrate just to illustrate that this is sort of like a technical and housekeeping update to document how engagement actually works today at the MPO. Our goals are accuracy, clarity, and transparency, both for stakeholders and for federal review. Next slide, please. This slide shows the timeline for the development of this update, so you can see where we are and where the where Community Advisory Council input fits in. So for the past year or so, we've, in preparation for the update, we've been researching best practices and documenting our own practices as they've evolved in the last 5 or so years. And then we are planning to engage the Advisory Council at multiple points, starting now, continuing into March, and then again in June once the plan is out for public review period. A 45-day public review period is a required step of this, and that is when broader public input is formally collected and documented. The Advisory Council's input is going to be early and iterative, and that will help us strengthen the draft before it goes out for public review more widely. Next slide, please. So to get more into what we're hoping the Advisory Council's role will be here, we're hoping that you all can be focused on helping us strengthen the draft before it's in a more final state. And specifically in the next phase of our engagement with you after this meeting, our ask is for input grounded in your experience as organizations and municipalities who engage with the MPO and your input on how the document reads from a public-facing perspective. That includes helping us to identify gaps, ambiguities, or places where the language may not fully reflect how our engagement works in practice. And then your input will help us improve clarity and understandability, which ultimately will support better engagement moving forward, as our engagement practices are going to be drawn from this document once it's in place and endorsed in June. So actions at the next couple of advisory council meetings. So today you're getting an intro to what the public engagement plan is in the timeline for developing the update. At the next, excuse me, advisory council meeting in March, we'll be having a discussion about specific elements of the plan, like really the content of the plan, and especially the elements that are going to see the most change since the 2021, the current version. And then again, at the May advisory council meeting, there'll be another discussion about the plan as it was released for public review. And this will be during the public review period. So there will still be time to consider and respond to the further input that we get from the group. And then before the May meeting, we might ask you to review a draft of the plan and provide feedback, possibly via a survey, because the actual draft plan and not just the outline and what we're planning to change will be available then. We don't expect the plan to be too long, but this will still amount to some homework. So we'll keep you posted on that and make sure you have plenty of time to do that review on behalf of your organizations and municipalities. Next slide. So we have about 5 to 7 minutes if in case there are any questions people have about the approach I laid out for the update, the timeline, and what I've put forward and proposed for the advisory council's role. And then at the March meeting is when we'll have the longer, more comprehensive discussion about the actual elements of the plan that we're targeting for update and alignment. So with that, any questions or elements of what I laid out that people would like to discuss? Okay, I don't see anything yet. It's a lot of information, but it's sort of meant to be an intro to the actual bigger conversation about the elements of the plan that we'll be having in March. But I think it's better to get for the first time you're hearing about something to not be the meeting where we're expecting thorough engagement with the topic. It's not that I expected there to be that much to discuss this time, but just we had the time, so I just wanted to leave that. I'll leave another 10 seconds in case anybody wants to consider whether they have any questions. Okay. And then we have a couple extra minutes, so I don't know if we want to steal some of those back just to not shortchange you all on time to discuss the study proposals. I see there's been some activity in the chat, so Olivia, if it's okay, just take just to leave another couple minutes in case people want to ask further questions or have further discussion before we get to the last couple of formal items of the meeting.
We can go back to any slide if folks want to revisit some of the studies. Just let us know. And just to mention, we are seeing the things people are writing in the comments and including those in our notes. So we've captured those too.
Okay. I think that we are good there. Okay, so now we're leaving space here for members' items. This can include any upcoming events or engagement opportunities or anything else members would like to share or would like other members to be aware of. Yeah, Reggie?
Yes, next week, T4MA will be opening our applications for the Champions Institute. We are this year looking for a tandem, an advocate, and a local public official. The public official can be a local elected or an official in your town and cities. Champions Institute is a program where we give resources to to applicants or to the cohort about complete streets. And more information will be available in our website, t4ma.org, by Friday this week or Monday at the latest. And I will be sure to share more information to this group via email. Thank you.
Thanks, Reggie. Yeah, if you wanna send me and Gia a blurb, it doesn't sound like maybe that the application will actually be launched by the time we send out the follow-up email to this meeting, but we can at least point people to where they can find the information once it's available.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. All right. Any other member items? Okay, so that wraps our February meeting. So with that, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn?
Jason Palich, so moved.
Maureen Edwards, second.
Thank you, Maureen. All right, thank you, and see you in 4 weeks, everyone, on March 9th.
Thank you.
Bye.